Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Vince McMahon is a rivalry that has impacted WWE history, the one that has largely contributed to the company taking on another dimension during the Attitude Era and that has made the Federation's ratings take off in the war against WCW. And above all, it offered us memorable moments. Do you want to discover or rediscover the best scenes from the legendary Austin vs. McMahon rivalry? Would you like to know why this feud got to captivate more viewers than ever for pro wrestling? Are you curious to know the secrets behind some of the most famous segments? You are at the right place because you are going to learn all the answers to these questions in this video. You are on the Wrestling Paradise, the most memorable moments from the epic rivalry between Stone Cold Steve Austin and Mr. McMahon. Here we go. A segment that is incredible in terms of acting and symbolism in my eyes is the one that took place on November 26th, 2001. You should know that 2001 was the year of the infamous Stone Cold heel turn at WrestleMania 17, when, after years of war, he sold his soul to Mr. McMahon in a shocking scene that disgusted some of the fans. And it was a creative decision that had negative consequences because from that point, the ratings began to decline when Austin was the rebellious babyface who made the life of his boss a living hell, all records were broken. By the way, Steve himself was the one who wanted to turn heel to refresh his character, but he admitted later that it didn't work. And at the end of the year, he went back to basics by bullying his eternal rival. In this scene, we were going to have a new awesome moment in my opinion, where Austin seems to join McMahon's infamous KMA club, If You Smell What I'm Cooking. But of course, the Rattlesnake knows better. He's going to give Vince a huge low blow and then hit him with his belt. Look at that amazing acting from the boss. Honestly, I love this segment, and it makes me laugh a lot. It's a really hilarious moment that even made Jim Ross laugh on commentary, which was very rare. And as luck would have it, the crowd loved it. On September 28th, 1998 on Raw, in this rivalry between the Texas Rattlesnake and his boss, there was a moment that has become legendary and its backstage story is also crazy. At that time, Vince had just managed to make Austin lose the title thanks to an evil master plan where he made a match at the Breakdown pay-per-view in which Stone Cold had to defend his belt against The Undertaker and Kane, knowing that to win, each of the two monsters who were also allies was forced to pin Austin. So it was basically a handicap match. And this McMahon strategy paid off since Taker and Kane ended up pinning him at the same time. The next day, the boss set up some kind of ceremony to name the new champ, while he was still very happy that the rebellious beer drinker was no longer the poster boy of his company. But then came a thunderous scene. Steve Austin arrived from the backstage zone driving a Zamboni. While driving, he destroyed everything in his path, and for the record, in his race he smashed electric equipment and almost killed the official Bruce Pritchard. He was in gorilla position and Austin almost ran him over since he couldn't see because of the curtains. In this chaos, even the sound of the commentators was almost turned off, and personally, I think that this moment when Austin arrives at the ring and jumps over the ropes on McMahon is awesome, and it perfectly represented all the madness of the Attitude Era. But there are even crazier stories to come, so make sure to stay until the end of this video. You are going to be surprised. On October 19th, 1998, the Rattlesnake and Mr. McMahon gave us another memorable scene on Raw. It was an absolutely crazy period of time in which each show went further and further in terms of unpredictable scenes. On that night, Austin came to the arena in Hunter's clothes with weapons, and he held the boss hostage and terrorized him, even making him do pig noises. And the reason why he went so far was because the day before, at Judgment Day, Vince fired him. Indeed, Steve, who was the special referee, didn't determine a new champion in the match between The Undertaker and Kane. He refused to fall into Vince's little game, who wanted to humiliate him by forcing him to lift the winner's arm. And on Raw, Steve wasn't going to let that slide. The scene ends with a very famous visual where Stone Cold pretends to shoot his boss with a gun, but it's actually just a toy with a small flag that says Bang 316. At that moment, in his fear, Mr. McMahon pissed his pants, which was an idea from Vince himself backstage. Personally, I find this whole segment creative and really interesting. It was worthy of a movie or a TV show with a real suspense about what was going to happen. Since the Rattlesnake looked ready to kill Vince, it was much more than a simple rivalry that boiled down to matches, but a real soap opera with two larger-than-life characters who went further and further in their hatred towards each other. And this is clearly one of the elements that captivated the viewers. Another tremendous scene between the two men that isn't talked about enough in my eyes is Stone Cold Steve Austin's induction in the Hall of Fame by Vince McMahon himself. Can you only imagine the symbolism of this moment in 2009? We had maybe the biggest star in the company's history who was inducted by none other than his biggest enemy for years. And besides, it was the first time that Vince himself inducted someone, and according to me, there couldn't be a better person to do it for than Stone Cold. It is a rare and powerful situation to have after years of rivalry. A pro wrestling personality who gives to his enemy the biggest honor possible for a wrestler. It clearly shows their great relationship behind the scenes, and by the way Stone Cold said about Mr. McMahon that their relationship was strong. He said he loved that guy and he's sure he probably loves him too. But a lot of times there was some animosity there. He's got nothing but respect for the guy and they're in a real good place. Obviously, it was a huge symbol to see Vince and Steve, more than 10 years after the birth of their rivalry at that time, reunite for this special scene. What also defines the rivalry between Austin and McMahon is that, even when its golden years were over and that there were no longer real weekly storylines between them, there were several moments that revived their feud for a bit. From 2003 and the Rattlesnake's retirement, even if he came back for a match at WrestleMania 38 against Kevin Owens, the Federation gave us some one-shot scenes in which, as a tribute to the past, we saw Stone Cold victimizing his boss again. And one of that best moments, even if it's not the more famous one, took place on March 1st, 2004. He chased his lifelong enemy with his quad bike, and this whole segment was incredible in my opinion. It should be noted that, at that time, this quad bike was Austin's official vehicle, and he even had a new sheriff gimmick on Raw, where he was the law. Personally, I love the way he drives that quad bike, and that moment when Vince is down and Steve threatens to run him down is great. Look at those expressions on Vince's face. What an actor! And we can appreciate the fact that it was the first time in their history that the Rattlesnake was in a position where he was chasing his rival with a vehicle. Seeing Stone Cold bullying his boss brought back some good memories and obviously reminded us of all their legendary scenes during the Attitude Era. It was pure nostalgia. And that moment when Vince did a remarkable jump to avoid Stone Cold, and the one where Austin goes with his quad bike on the roof of the limousine in which the boss took shelter, were really top quality entertainment. It was impossible for me to rank the most significant moments of the rivalry between the Texas Rattlesnake and the former boss, in my opinion, without talking about that awesome scene in the hospital, which surely represents one of my biggest pro wrestling related laughs of my entire life. It happened on October 5th, 1998, and Vince was at the hospital after being beat up the week before by Stone Cold, but also The Undertaker and Kane. The whole segment was really worthy of a comedy with First Mankind, who was going to cheer him up by bringing in a clown and by doing his sock puppet act. Mr. Socko, moreover, it was the first time that this character appeared, and apparently it was Al Snow's idea, one of Foley's friends in the business. A little later, Vince was going to have the unpleasant surprise of discovering that the doctor in his hospital room was none other than Stone Cold. He assaulted him on his bed and even gave him a bedpan shot on his skull. This whole scene was hilarious, and before they recorded it, Steve stayed in the hallway for 30 minutes thinking, because he was hesitant to hit Vince's head with the bedpan or not. He did in the end, after having found the perfect spot on that bedpan that would hurt the least. What I particularly appreciate about this scene is that we get out of the arena. It's a real segment in the outside world, and I think it's a creative possibility that should be used more nowadays because it often gives us unforgettable scenes. And the number one, the most memorable moment in my eyes between Austin and McMahon is the one and only match they had against each other on February 14th, 1999 at St. Valentine's Day Massacre. I made that choice not because it's a spectacular scene with vehicles and whatnot, but for what this whole match represented. It was the peak of this rivalry. At that moment, it had been almost a year since their feud started. They almost had a match in April 1998. Since then, the boss had been doing everything in his power to prevent Stone Cold from being champion, while the latter, as a response, went further and further in his rebellion and the mayhem he was creating. Let me ask you this, can we imagine a better context for the first one-on-one match between these two men who hated each other than a cage match on Valentine's Day, during the road to WrestleMania? What an incredible irony that these two enemies had their first match against each other on the day of the celebration of love. All the storytelling surrounding this match was awesome, remembering that Vince even won the Royal Rumble a few weeks before. And what shocked me the most was, of course, the spectacular bump Vince had from the top of the cage on the commentator's table, after which his back turned completely blue. And for the record, his wife Linda forced him to go see a doctor while he didn't want to. It ended with the debut of Big Show in the Federation. And what is completely crazy is that he had to stay hidden under the ring for hours with a mattress and a TV screen before he could make his appearance. For me, this whole match was really the ultimate showdown between Austin and McMahon, a first big ending in their story after months and months of twists, evil master plans, henchmen doing Vince's dirty work, and big spectacular scenes. And without the shadow of a doubt for me, this was its peak. Wasn't that crazy? Can you believe how many iconic scenes this rivalry created? Who would have thought that Austin almost killed Bruce Pritchard with the Zamboni, and that Vince was the one who had the idea of pissing his pants? All these moments clearly show how creative the Federation was able to be in the Attitude Era, and how this boss-employee clash truly was must-see TV. Obviously, it helped the company to win the Monday Night War against WCW, and I have a debate for you. Is it the best rivalry ever in your eyes? Tell us what you think. It will be great to discuss it together in the comments and to exchange our opinions. We can say that this rivalry is stupendous. I hope you had a good time watching this video, and I invite you to stay on the Paradise of Wrestling to look at some other ones. See you right away.
And that's the bottom line, 'cause Stone Cold said so. What?